Hello everybody, my name is Joy of Crime Art, and you ever wonder what Big Mouth would be like if it started a bunch of cute anime girls? Wait, hold on, I can explain. FBI, open up! Now, when you think about it, I feel like there's no part of one's life that is held to such a high regard more than adolescence. With dozens upon dozens of TV shows, movies, and especially anime practically glamorizing it. And it's easy to see why. I mean, it's a very unique time in a person's life after all. A time in which one goes from being a child to an adult, and new feelings and emotions that one has not experienced before begin to blossom. But for as glamorized as adolescence often is, in reality, it's not always just sunshine and rainbows. There's a downside to it as well. It can be an awkward and confusing time in a person's life. A time where one is a slave to their own hormones, which causes them to make dumb decision after dumb decision because they don't know any better. This is the aspect of adolescence that isn't glamorized. And I think no series captures this aspect of adolescence better than 𝓗𝓸𝓻𝓷𝓂. 𝓗𝓸𝓻𝓷𝓂 is a manga series that was released in 2016 and written by mariokada, an anime screenwriter and director who has worked on several high-profile anime series and film, gaining prominence in the early 2010s after co-creating the critically acclaimed anime series Anohana, the Flower We Saw That Day. However, 𝓗𝓗𝓻𝓷𝓂 was mariokada's first foray into manga, and because of this, she wanted to try something a little different from her previous works and take advantage of her new medium by attempting to create something that she felt wouldn't have been improved if it was pitched as an anime. And so she decided to write a series that would delve into the themes of eroticism and teenage sexuality from a mostly female perspective, after noticing that teen sex comedies were almost always written exclusively from a male point of view. Her goal was to tackle these themes in a way that would, with no exaggeration, be too hot for TV. And so the series got an anime adaptation 3 years later in 2019. Yeah, so during development of the manga, mariokada's initial vision of the series kind of went off in a different direction. As while developing the series, she concluded that the characters would be too pure and innocent to really delve as deep into the themes of eroticism as she initially intended. The theme was still present in the series, but in a way that was much more of a PG-13 as opposed to an R, meaning that the series was now perfectly acceptable for an anime adaptation, which is what I'm here to talk about today. So let's dive in and discuss 𝓗𝓗𝓻𝓷𝓂. Maidens follows 5 members of a high school literature club: Kazusa, Sugawara, Sonezaki, Momoko, and Hongo. 5 nerdy bookworms who are just as precocious as they are pretentious. All 5 girls have a deep love for literary works but find themselves embarrassed by how many of the books they've been reading have been delving into topics of sexual relations, especially as these works of literature begin to awaken sexual feelings within the 5 girls. I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. Am I a pedo? Is it weird to have an anime series that tackles the sexual awakening of 5 underage high school girls? And to be fair, I think this is a fair question to ask, but I think the topic is a bit nuanced. As I said at the beginning of the video, adolescence is a very important time in a person's life, and it is undoubtedly a major part of the human condition, and exploring one's sexuality is an important part of adolescence. And if part of the point of art is to comment on the human condition, then it would stand to reason that tackling these topics, no matter how taboo, would have at least some merit. Funnily enough, the show sort of addresses this, as the Literature Club questions where to draw the line between sex being used as a way to elevate a piece of literature and straight up pornography. Now, I have no proof of this, but part of me wonders if this could be the author commenting on the series itself. However, with subjects this taboo, and focusing on minors no less, it's definitely a subject that would have to be tread lightly. But I think 𝓗𝓗𝓻 managed to tackle the concept of teenage sexuality in a way that manages to avoid coming off as creepy, because everything is done with purpose. It is more focused on the emotions that come with sexual desire rather than the sexual desire itself. Despite the show being about a bunch of anime girls delving into eroticism, the series actually has almost no fan service at all, so it doesn't come across as too skeevy. The show isn't ecchi, it's more like a really awkward rom-com. The show itself isn't horny, it just follows wholesome girls doing horny things, as opposed to Watamote, which follows horny girls doing wholesome things.
And believe me, there is a difference.
Also helping is the series' overall tone, which despite the subject matter leans pretty hard into comedy, kind of making fun of how melodramatic our leads are and how overall awkward puberty can be. The series has dramatic moments too, of course, but I think by treating the subject matter kind of as a joke and keeping the overall tone of the series fairly light even when the series delves into darker territories, it becomes kind of easier to sort of laugh along with the series and not take it too seriously. Each of our 5 leads have their own personal subplots as they traverse their budding feelings of young love, which the series keeps bouncing back and forth between, so I think it's best to talk about each member of the literature club one at a time. While the series is an ensemble series, Kazusa is probably the closest the series has to a main character. Being a sweet and awkward girl whose main conflict comes from having a crush on her next door neighbor and best friend Izumi, but finds herself too nervous to confess her feelings out of both a lack of self-confidence and a concern that doing so could end up ruining their friendship. A premise that I admit is about as cliche as they come. However, things become more difficult for Kazusa when she inadvertently walks in on Izumi masturbating, which not only creates an awkward tension between the two, but causes Kazusa to come to the realization that Izumi could potentially be sexually attracted to other women. Okay, less cliche, I'll give it that. Kazusa may not be the deepest or most unique character, but she's really likable and her pure naivete really makes her easy to root for. Kazusa is almost cartoonishly pure and innocent when it comes to the topic of sex, and as a result finds herself in a form of internal conflict, being simultaneously interested in sex while also being intimidated and repulsed by it at the same time, which is kind of refreshing. As a lot of the times when you see teenagers in TV, movies, or anime, they're often depicted as constantly horny perverts, and there's a lot of truth to that. But there's also cases where teenagers are more awkward or intimidated by the thought of doing sexual stuff, even if they're still interested in it. So it's nice seeing that be represented. I also really like her relationship with Izumi, who is more than just a generic love interest, he's a character in his own right. This guy goes through so much crap all for the crimes of being a horny teen that it's honestly hard not to feel for him. But beyond that, he's just a nice, chill guy, and he and Kazusa have genuine chemistry with each other, which helps you as the audience root for them to get together. One thing I really like about the series is that Kazusa and Izumi get together about halfway through the series instead of at the very end like in most shows, which means we actually get time to see them as a couple and the challenges that come with that. As at this point, both characters are very much aware that the other is interested in sex, but both are afraid to make the first move if they feel that doing so could come across as too awkward given their history together. However, both are also aware that they simply don't have sex, so it'll come off as insulting to the other. It's a dynamic I haven't really seen tackled before, capturing the messy feelings that come with being in your first relationship really well. Next we have Sugawara. Sugawara is a quiet and mysterious girl who's also one of the most popular girls in schools due to her apparent beauty. Yeah, the show keeps reiterating how beautiful Sugawara is. I mean, she's not ugly or anything, but I don't know, she looks about the same as everyone else in the literature club. I did find that a little weird. However, this popularity isn't necessarily a good thing, as Sugawara not only has to deal with jealousy at the hands of other girls, but even worse has to deal with the sexual advantage of not just her classmates but grown-ups as well. Even being groomed by her theater director at a young age, and while nothing physical had actually occurred between the two, the trauma has still left a toll on Sugawara, causing her to have an adverse feeling to rejection, and an inability to relate to others, constantly feeling like an outsider even within her own friend group. And after years of being the target of other people's advances, she wants to experience a genuine relationship for herself in order to figure out what all the hype is about, eventually falling in love with Izumi, and being torn on whether or not she should hide her feelings in order to maintain her friendship with Kazusa, or be true to her own feelings even if it means cucking her friend. She decides to try to cuck her friend. Many may feel like this would make Sugawara unlikable. And yeah, they wouldn't be wrong. But the series does a good job of letting you understand why she does what she does, as well as showing how and why she fell for Izumi in the first place, as he's one of the only guys who actually treat her with kindness without ulterior motives. And she openly admits that she just wants to confess her feelings to him, and it is implied that if Izumi did full-heartedly turn her down in favor of Kazusa, she would accept it. Her decision to try to steal Izumi from Kazusa may be selfish, but at the end of the day she's just a dumb hormone-stricken teenager, so even if it makes her kind of unlikable, it still makes sense. But still, not a bro move. Momoko is Kazusa's best friend who, like Kazusa, has very little experience with sexual stuff, but is forced to confront him when she's asked out by a guy, only for there to be a slight snag when, as time goes on, Momoko begins to realize that she's not actually attracted to guys at all, but is in fact a lesbian and is attracted to Sugawara. Because this love triangle just wasn't complicated enough, now it has to be a love rhombus. Momoko's subplot is honestly pretty good for what it is. However, I feel like it's probably the subplot that's given the least amount of focus overall, so I think it suffers a bit as a result, with some things feeling a bit rushed, like her relationship with the guy she goes out with, Sugimoto, who throughout the season is depicted as being overly clingy and a bit of a tryhard, especially given the fact that he and Momoko only went out on one date and weren't officially a couple or anything. But still, nothing too bad. But then once Momoko comes to terms with being gay and wants to call the relationship off with him, he's suddenly written to be this raging misogynistic jerk. I feel like this was done to make Momoko breaking up with him more justified. I don't know, I feel like being a lesbian is justification enough. Or if they wanted to have an arc where Momoko dates this guy and he ends up becoming a controlling creep, I feel like they could have done more to steadily build towards it and foreshadow the twist beforehand. Because as is, it feels like it kind of comes a bit out of nowhere. One thing I kind of do like is how when Momoko does confess to Sugawara, she gets turned down because Sugawara is straight, which is something that we don't really see happen much in cartoons. Usually when a person has a crush on someone else, they always have compatible sexualities. So it's interesting seeing a story where that isn't the case. It's more realistic and also deals with a problem that I feel like many gay people could probably relate to. And it still all works out okay in the end, because even though Momoko can't be with Sugawara romantically, she's still able to take comfort in the fact that they can still be friends despite that. Sonezaki is the head of the literature club, a prudish and intelligent young girl who is the most adverse to anything sexual, due to seeing it as being carnal and vulgar. If there is a horny jail, then Sonezaki would be the warden. However, this changes when Sonezaki falls in love with a boy in her class named Amagi, forcing Sonezaki to confront her own hypocrisy. I like Sonezaki a lot. Her hammy and over-the-top personality and relatively low-stakes subplot doing a lot to add some levity to some of the heavier arcs some of the other girls are going through. And Sonezaki and Amagi's romance is super sweet. I admit that unlike Izumi, Amagi is kind of a generic one-dimensional love interest who doesn't really have much to him besides liking Sonezaki and being kinda dumb, but I still get behind Amagi because he is good boy. Honestly, Sonezaki is probably the character who goes through the most personal change over the course of the series, even befriending popular classmate Jujo after previously slut-shaming her at the start of the series. They have a really fun dynamic with each other, and it causes Sonezaki to come to the realization just because you're interested in sex doesn't mean you're a bad person, something she is forced to confront head-on when she finds out that Amagi has had relationships with other girls prior to dating her, but realizing that just because she's not his first love doesn't mean that their relationship is any less special. And finally we have Hongo, a gloomy and sarcastic member of the literature club and aspiring author, who was given the chance to make her big debut writing a piece of erotic literature, but is unable to write convincingly due to her lack of experience. This causes her to start engaging in shady online chat rooms and eventually meeting the guy she's been sexting in person in hopes of sleeping with him in order to gain an authentic sexual experience, in hopes of improving her writing. Only for it to turn out that the guy she was sexting was none other than her English teacher, Yamagishi-sensei.
Sir, I need to talk to you for a minute.
He runs, but he doesn't get very far.
Now in Yamagishi's defense, he didn't know that Honjo was underage. It makes it very clear that he isn't interested in her after finding out that Honjo was a high school girl. However, it seems like it's less out of the morality of the situation, and more due to the fact that he just finds underage girls unattractive. Which is a bit... oof. Yeah, I'm not dating a high school girl. They're not even hot. Icky. However, Honjo quickly begins to fall for her teacher, and not only blackmails him to becoming their club advisor when they don't have one, but even tries to pressure him into doing illicit things with her at the threat of exposing him for sexting, which begs the question, does it still count as pedophilia if the child is sexually assaulting the adult? Not to say that Yamagishi is completely innocent either though. Like yeah, I can let him off the hook for the sexting thing since the chatroom site he was using was an 18+ site, but even after he finds out that Honjo is underage, he still agrees to engage in informal sexual behavior with her, partially in order to avoid being exposed, but also partially out of a genuine want to help her write her book. Stuff like seeing her flash her panties at him and stuff like that. Now to be fair, it is established that he isn't getting off on this at all, but still, the whole situation is kinda messed up.
Molest me.
No.
Come on, do it.
Leave me alone.
Oh, what, you chicken? Buck, 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 buck. Guess you can't be a chicken because I don't see no cock!
I could definitely see the subplot turning some people off for a variety of reasons. Like, yeah, objectively speaking, Honjo was terrible, and basically gets no comeuppance for her actions. In fact, the show doesn't really treat her actions as wrong, just kind of misguided. And really, Yamagishi isn't really that great either. However, what makes a lot of this easier to swallow, for me at least, is the tone the series has. While yes, the situation is objectively messed up, the show doesn't really treat it in a dark or serious way. So it's pretty easy to just turn your brain off and ignore the, attempted rape thing. But I also get that it may be difficult for some people. Let's talk about the series' comedy, because despite all the things I talked about before, with the child grooming and attempted rape, the series is still a comedy, I promise. And it's a pretty good comedy at that, relying a lot on cringe comedy and the juxtaposition between the wholesome ignorance of our main girls and the perverted antics they get involved in. Like all cringe comedy isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I think it's very easy to relate to the characters. Even if you haven't experienced the exact situation the characters are going through, I think most of us can relate to being a hormone-addled teen with no idea of how relationships work. The comedy is highlighted by the animation, which can get really cartoony and over the top at points, which is not only really expressive, but juxtaposes the more traditional anime-esque designs really well. And speaking of which, let's talk about the animation. It's honestly pretty good. It's very aesthetically pleasing, weird CGI watering cans notwithstanding. However, something I'm not really much of a fan of is the lighting, which I know seems like a really weird thing to bring up, but I can't help it. Everything in the series is just way too bright. Like, it's not bad in scenes in the school or outside, but in places like Kazusa's house, it's way too overexposed, and I have no idea why. The voice acting in the series is also pretty good, for the most part. I watched the series dubbed, and the dub was done by Sentai Filmworks. I said before in my Watamote review that Sentai isn't really my favorite dubbing company. Nothing against them. I just think that since they're a smaller company, they probably just don't have as much access to a lot of the talent and resources as bigger companies like Crunchyroll or Viz have. But this dub is honestly pretty good. Most of the cast give really good performances, handling both the comedic moments and the dramatic moments really well, though some character casting felt a bit weird. Like Kazusa and Izumi both sounded a lot older than I feel like they were supposed to, given the fact that they're only 16.
Ever since we were little, you've always liked putting milk in your kalpis.
Don't judge, it makes it all creamy and smooth.
I got used to it. I think both actors gave really good performances, but Kazusa was giving me some Anne from Amphibia vibes for the first couple of episodes. Meanwhile, the guy who plays the theater director who grooms Sugawara sounds way too young for the age his character is supposed to be.
I desire you so very badly to stand on my stage.
But again, I don't want to make it sound like I hated the dub or anything, as for the most part the cast did a pretty good job, and these complaints are for the most part just nitpicks. So I just have to talk about the series ending, so if you're interested in checking the series out for yourself and don't want to be spoiled, I would suggest skipping to the outro. But I just need to talk about this, because this ending is nuts. So for everyone else, I need to give a bit of context. So near the end of the series, due to all the various sexcapades going on throughout the series, the school principal and vice principal decided to implement a strict no dating policy throughout the school, and planning on expelling Sonezaki and her boyfriend in order to use them as an example. The rest of the literature club members are obviously outraged by this, as Sonezaki didn't do anything wrong, so they decide to hatch a plan in order to get her expulsion revoked. How do they go about doing this?
Hey, how about terrorism?
By kidnapping Yamagishi and barring themselves inside the school, and holding him at ransom and refusing to let him go unless they revoke Sonezaki's expulsion. The rest of the faculty don't just call the police for some reason, and just kind of leave them in the school overnight to attempt to have them cool their heads. Like, what? And in the end, the plan works. Sonezaki doesn't get expelled, all the girls get off scot-free for their blatant felony, and everyone just lives happily ever after. Like, what? This climax just feels so out of place given the general tone the rest of the series has. Like, maybe if they just lock themselves inside the school as a form of protest, then maybe I could buy it. But once they added kidnapping to the mix, my suspension of disbelief was just completely broken. I'm sorry, but like, how did we get here?
Sex is a completely unexplored realm to me. All these authors writing about it has piqued my curiosity. I just think it would be a pity to die without ever knowing what it's like.
I'll admit to you that I think about this kind of stuff, but I want you to know that I never think about doing it with anyone close to me or anything weird like that. Or even with you, for that matter. I haven't thought about doing it with anyone I know. Period. Not even once.
Oh no. I'm in love with Izumi.
Until recently, I'd never gotten a crush on a girl before. Yes, but you can't have sex with me. You cannot have SEX with your friends.
What is it about him? All the hurtful words people have thrown at me in the past are slowly being washed away by this rainstorm of cute he created.
The way he looked at me was so different than before. It's softer and warmer now. I want to become someone that he'll never, ever forget.
Unbelievable! My darling underclassmen have been colored by concupiscence!
The memories of that awkward, graceless season will replay in my mind ad infinitum.
𝓗𝓸𝓻𝓷𝓂 ran for 12 episodes, seemingly gathering a pretty positive reception, with a live-action adaptation airing in 2020 in Japan. Just if you thought the series wasn't uncomfortable enough. I couldn't find the series legally streaming or for purchase anywhere, but from some clips I saw on YouTube, it seems like it's a pretty faithful adaptation. There was only 8 episodes as opposed to the anime's 12, so I imagine that some parts of the story were probably condensed. But beyond that, the series just kind of came and went, which I think is kind of a pity. 𝓗𝓸𝓻𝓷𝓂 isn't an anime that's going to be for everyone. But for what it is, an exploration to that awkward period of adolescence and sexual discovery, through a somewhat comedic lens, I think it does a really good job for what the series sets out to do. I have my problems with the series. Like I said, some of the characters are pretty unlikable and the ending felt really out of place. But despite that, I liked the characters and was invested in where their stories would end up. And I think no matter who you are, you'll find yourself relating to at least one of these characters. While the topic it covers may be a bit taboo, I think they're topics that are worth covering, as long as they're handled in a dignified way, which I think they are here, for the most part. Any flaws I have can be overlooked. I highly recommend this series, and I think it deserves a lot more attention than it's gotten. If you've made it this far into the video and this series sounds at all interesting to you, I highly recommend you check it out for yourself. The series is available to stream on HIDIVE, and is also available for purchase on Blu-ray. If you've seen this series, what do you think of it? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I genuinely want to hear what you all think. And if you like this video, feel free to like it, subscribe, consider checking out my Patreon if you want to see more videos like it. And as always, have a great day.